A country that is losing a war does not reject a ceasefire on national television. A country that is losing begs for one. And yet, there he was, Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, sitting under the hot studio lights of America's Meet the Press. He wasn't addressing the host. He was looking directly into the camera at millions of Americans. After a quiet, calculated pause, he delivered the message. A clear, unequivocal rejection of the American ceasefire request. You could see the surprise flicker across the host's face. In that moment, the entire narrative was broken. A country under fire was refusing to stop the fighting. It makes no sense. So what was really going on here? Well, before we can even begin to understand Iran's impossible no, we have to analyze the question that is almost never asked. Why did America have to ask for a ceasefire in the first place? America blinked first, and understanding that is the key to everything that follows. To understand that stunning no on live television, you have to start with the question nobody in Washington wanted to ask. What would drive a superpower that started this war to sue for peace in secret? The answer doesn't sit in any diplomatic cable, it's in the wreckage. Billions burned and coffins coming home, of a gambit meant to topple Iran's leadership in days. To see that desperation, rewind 10 days to late February 2026 and an operation codenamed Epic Fury, sold as a rapid regime change strike to remove the supreme leader and collapse the structure around him. On paper, it looked clean. Hit key nodes, eliminate the leadership, let internal fissures do the rest. In reality, the operation bogged down. Within the first 100 hours, instead of a fractured regime, US forces ran into coordinated resistance, and Washington had already spent $3.7 billion without disabling Iran's nuclear program or breaking the state's grip on power. The financial bleed was clear. That $3.7 billion in the first 100 hours wasn't a one-off. It previewed the burn rate of a prolonged fight. Oil pushed toward $120 a barrel, which doesn't just hurt at the pump, it forces investors to reprice energy risk and turns every extra week of bombing into a debate about growth, inflation, and funding costs at home. Then the human cost hit home. 7 American soldiers in coffins flown back on camera, an image that landed in living rooms and in Washington. Yet despite the money and the dead, the core objectives were still out of reach. The supreme leader was assassinated, but his son Mojtaba Kameh stepped in, hardening resistance, and the nuclear program remained intact. Washington had paid in blood and capital without removing the capability it said this war was about. Put it together. A stalled operation, $3.7 billion burned already, oil near 120, 7 coffins on the news, and a nuclear program still intact. At that point, continuing meant open-ended costs for no clear gain. Asking for a ceasefire was the only way to stop the bleeding long enough to reassess. That is only one side of the equation, why Washington asked. The other, why Tehran said no, lies not in these 10 days, but in a documented, much darker history of what happens after they agree. That darker story isn't ancient history, it's a documented pattern with dates. Exhibit A, June 2025. After a round of nuclear negotiations in Geneva, talks had not collapsed. Iranian and American diplomats were still at the table when US and Israeli forces launched a coordinated strike on Iranian sites, a first breach carried out mid-negotiation, not after diplomacy had failed. Exhibit B, February 2026, just before this war. Talks in Oman and Rome were stalled, but still underway when strikes killed Iranian military leaders. That is not battlefield noise. It is the same move, repeated while the other side is still in the room. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, later spelled it out on global television. We negotiated with the United States twice, and every single time they attacked us in the middle of those negotiations. He was stating a fact, not performing for a domestic crowd. Yet that sentence rarely appears in Western coverage that casts Tehran as ideological. Precisely the line that flips how their decisions read. Set that record beside the current American offer of a pause. When Washington returns to the table mid-conflict and asks for time, to Tehran's strategists, this is not an olive branch. It is a tactical trap. Western audiences are told that rejecting a ceasefire is reckless, even suicidal. But if you've lived through June 2025 and February 2026, the same offer looks like the opening move in an ambush. What sounds like stubborn defiance from afar is, in that context, rational self-preservation. From Tehran, a pause is a window for the United States to regroup, resupply, and strike again from a better position. Accepting a temporary ceasefire without hard, enforceable guarantees is not just a lesser option. It approaches strategic suicide. And that calculation mirrors the logic of one of the West's most celebrated wartime leaders when he faced the same fork in the road. Accept a truce that locks in your disadvantage, or fight on for the chance at a permanent victory. That leader was Winston Churchill. The year was 1940, and Britain was on the verge of annihilation. It's late May. France has fallen. The British Army has just been evacuated from the beaches of Dunkirk. Over 338,000 soldiers brought back across the Channel. But they returned without their tanks, artillery, or heavy equipment. Britain was, for all practical purposes, defenseless. From this position of overwhelming strength, Hitler offered peace terms. Inside the underground war cabinet rooms in London, the discussions turned sharp. Between May 26th and 28th, Churchill's own Foreign Secretary, the influential Lord Halifax, pressed hard for negotiation. Around the table, ashtrays filled, jackets were loosened, and voices rose as Halifax laid out the pragmatic case. Britain was alone and exposed. Why not at least explore a deal that might save the country from what looked like an inevitable, bloody invasion? But Churchill refused. Absolutely. He didn't haggle over possible terms. He didn't debate the precise odds of a successful defence. He pointed instead to one hard, unchanging variable: the character of his opponent. He reminded his cabinet of the Munich Agreement of 1938, where Hitler had given his solemn promise, only to break it months later. The core of Churchill's argument, as his secretary later recalled, was brutally simple. What makes you think that we could have trusted Hitler's word? Churchill understood that when you are dealing with a proven aggressor, a ceasefire offer is rarely about peace. It is a tactical pause, a chance to rearm, reposition, and prepare for a final decisive blow. He saw Hitler's offer for what it was: strategic deception. Over time, this kind of decision, refusing negotiations on the basis of a clear record of betrayal, has come to embody a cornerstone pattern in Western strategic thinking: rational distrust of an opponent whose word has already failed. And Churchill was willing to stake his nation's survival on that logic. So when we look at this historical precedent, across a very different era, regime type, and balance of power, we're not searching for a perfect copy of today's situation, but for the underlying principle. In Iran's case, its leaders point to past attacks during supposed negotiations and claim they are applying that same doctrine of rational distrust. Do you see the refusal of the American offer as a necessary move to avoid a trap, or as a reckless gamble that will lead to ruin? I'm interested to see your analysis in the comments. But here is where the analysis gets even more complex. Because even if you believe their strategy of distrust is sound, even if you see echoes of Churchill's precedent in their decision, it might not matter. The parallel breaks down because of a structural flaw deep inside Iran itself that makes a lasting peace agreement virtually impossible, no matter who is sitting at the table. That flaw is baked into how the Iranian state is built. Iran doesn't operate as a single actor, but as two chains of command. A civilian one under President Pezeshkian for diplomacy, and a military one under the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. They're deliberately disconnected, so that IRGC regional commanders keep their own launch authority and diplomatic concessions, neither automatically bind nor look like weakness to the men giving the orders, at the cost of making any peace gesture almost impossible to implement in the field. That split can run in two directions at once. In an office in Tehran, the foreign ministry drafts a cable on de-escalation, while hundreds of miles away on an airbase, an IRGC field commander works through a launch checklist, confirms coordinates on a targeting grid, and orders the strike. When President Pezeshkian issued an apology to Gulf neighbors and announced a suspension of attacks, IRGC missile strikes were reported in the same Gulf theater within hours, turning the gesture into proof that no single actor in Iran can guarantee a deal. For anyone negotiating or allocating capital, that is the risk you're trading against. Even before you reach this internal split, rational distrust makes each side wary of moving first toward a ceasefire. Add a state that cannot speak with one voice, and even if trust improves, every failed pause reinforces the belief that Iranian promises are empty, all built on top of one 10-letter word that both capitals use but define in opposite ways, the semantic gap that keeps the deadlock in place. That 10-letter word is ceasefire, and each side is reading a different definition. In a Pentagon room, an official watches Brent crude and futures swing red. For Washington, ceasefire means pause, a tool to steady energy markets and portfolios while they rethink a failing approach without calling it defeat. A family in Tehran hears the word on state news and faces harden. The last ceasefire they remember ended in what people call the Black Rain, days when missiles and debris turned the sky dark over their street. For them, ceasefire means trap, a lull the other side can use to move assets, reload, and strike once outside pressure eases. Meanwhile, a commodities trader in a Dubai tower down the Gulf is watching risk screens, not speeches. Insurance spreads on tankers through Hormuz spike, routes shift, delivery dates slip. For him, and for the ports and logistics chains around him, ceasefire means lifeline, a chance to keep trade moving before the shock in the strait spills into payrolls, property values, and stability. Same word. Three meanings: pause, trap, lifeline. You can't negotiate peace when each camp hears a different risk calculation in the offer. They're not refusing the same deal, they're defending against different futures. If this looks chaotic, the economists in the next room would disagree. Game theorists model what happens when rational actors face each other with zero trust and conflicting definitions of safety. And the outcome isn't random. It's the logical equilibrium a language war like this produces. That game has a name, the prisoner's dilemma, a cornerstone of game theory. It provides the intellectual framework that decodes this entire conflict, moving it from the realm of chaos into a system of predictable, albeit tragic, logic. Let's visualize this. Imagine a simple 4-quadrant grid. On one axis, we have the United States. On the other, Iran. Each has two choices: to cooperate, meaning to pursue a verifiable and lasting peace, or to defect, meaning to launch a preemptive strike or betray the truce. First, consider the ideal outcome. If both the US and Iran choose to cooperate, they both win. The region stabilizes, sanctions ease, capital returns. This is the best collective result. However, now consider the perspective of a US strategist. If the US chooses to cooperate, but Iran defects, using the peace as a cover for a major attack, the outcome is catastrophic. It is a strategic disaster. From Iran's perspective, the calculus is identical. If they cooperate, but the US defects, a scenario they believe has already played out with the JCPOA withdrawal and attacks during prior negotiations, they are left militarily exposed and politically humiliated. For each side, this scenario of being the sole cooperator is the single worst possible outcome. This leads to the grimly logical conclusion in the final quadrant. Because the potential cost of being betrayed is unacceptably high, and because there is no credible way for either side to guarantee it won't defect, what theorists call a commitment problem, the only truly rational choice for each actor playing for their own survival is to defect preemptively. They must continue to fight. Both sides are now locked in a lose-lose scenario of mutual conflict. It's a worse outcome than peace, but it is preferable to the catastrophe of being betrayed. This isn't a story of good versus evil, or a failure of diplomacy. It is a structural, mathematical trap. The system itself forces rational actors into a cycle of costly escalation that simple linear analysis will always fail to predict. But this framework is far more than an academic exercise. This logical trap, this forced escalation we've just mapped, has a quantifiable price tag. And that's precisely where we're going next. We will move from the theoretical to the tangible and calculate the direct, measurable cost this prisoner's dilemma is exacting on your portfolio right now. This cost materializes not as a sudden market crash, but through a far more corrosive force. Sustained, embedded inflation. The ongoing conflict, rooted in the strategic stalemate we have mapped, creates a persistent risk premium on every barrel of oil. This isn't a one-off spike, it behaves like a standing tax on the global economy. Roughly 20% of the world's oil supply moves through the Strait of Hormuz, so the market must constantly price in the threat of disruption. That premium flows straight into higher shipping, insurance, and production costs, which then show up in the prices of transport, food, and manufactured goods. As long as the core commitment problem between the US and Iran remains unresolved, that threat and the extra cost it imposes does not go away. Research from Morgan Stanley estimates that a sustained 10% rise in oil prices can lift US headline CPI by roughly 0.35 percentage points. Goldman Sachs models are even starker, projecting a 0.6 to 0.7 percentage point addition to global inflation if oil stays above $100 a barrel. Because energy is an input into almost everything, transport, manufacturing, and food production, that uplift doesn't stay confined to the gas pump. It filters through to the price of nearly every good and service you use. We've seen echoes of this before. In the 1970s, oil shocks cascaded through wages and prices, shifting the entire inflation regime for years rather than months. That 0.7% is not just a number on a screen. It is a hidden tax on your retirement portfolio, silently eroding the real value of your savings while markets are distracted by daily headlines. Sustained over a decade, even that seemingly small extra inflation can significantly reduce your future purchasing power relative to what traditional planning assumptions imply, as rising living costs quietly outrun nominal portfolio growth. Over time, this squeeze forces companies to choose between raising prices and compressing margins, undermining the quality of earnings that equity investors depend on. This is why official narratives that promise a short war and a quick normalization in prices are strategically misleading for any serious investor. They assume that once the shooting stops, the risk premium and inflation impulse simply evaporate, which is not what these models imply. The real threat is not a quick, sharp shock. It is a long-term drag on global growth. This persistent inflationary pressure dampens central bank expectations for rate cuts, creating a fundamentally challenging environment where both equity and bond returns are suppressed. For equities, higher for longer inflation forces a repricing. Input costs and wage pressures squeeze margins, while elevated discount rates pull valuation multiples down, so nominal gains deliver far less real wealth creation. For bonds, stubbornly high yields mean lower prices and less diversification benefit. So the familiar 60-40 playbook, equities for growth, bonds for stability, delivers far less protection and real return than investors have been trained to expect. So, all the components are now in place. We have dissected the strategic logic of rational distrust, mapped the game theory trap that forces escalation, and quantified the resulting economic price. It is time to assemble these pieces into the final inescapable picture of this conflict. So that inescapable picture, what is it? It is a stalemate wired into the objectives themselves. We have now seen the rejection, understood the history of betrayal, and mapped the logic of the game. The conclusion is no longer a matter of opinion. It's a matter of strategic physics. Iran treats any temporary pause without an enforceable guarantee of regime survival as a delayed execution, while Washington treats any such guarantee as locking in a strategic defeat and admitting the operation failed. Add a record of broken promises, and there is no ceasefire formula both can accept as survival. Think of it as a chessboard where one player's safe defensive move looks like checkmate to the other. In that game, Tehran cannot accept a pause that leaves US power intact and unconstrained. Every day of quiet, without guarantees, is in their eyes time for the other side to regroup and target the regime. Washington cannot offer the irreversible security Tehran wants without signaling to allies and rivals that US leverage in the Gulf just collapsed. This isn't just an absence of an elegant solution. It's a board position where every plausible compromise move is read as defeat by at least one player. When both sides read the same move as surrender, negotiation stops being a way out and becomes just another arena of pressure, which leaves only one viable strategy: wear the other side down. That is what a war of attrition means here. Each side is betting it can outlast the other on three fronts: domestic tolerance, fiscal burn rate, and regional influence. Tehran is gambling that its population will absorb hardship as the price of regime survival, and that US publics will tire first as costs accumulate and regional partners start hedging. Washington is gambling that sustained economic and military pressure will eventually fracture Iran's inner circle or force a climb down that looks like public acceptance of US red lines. Buckling isn't a dramatic battlefield collapse. It's the moment one side decides that the political or economic price of continuing is higher than the humiliation of backing off. And as one strategist bleakly noted, history has a word for wars, where both sides believe the other side will give in first. It is not a short word, and it is not a cheap one. For anyone managing capital, that signals something uncomfortable. This is not a sharp shock you trade around and forget, but a background condition you have to underwrite. These costs are not abstract. They are quantifiable. The financial expenditure is staggering. In the first 100 hours of the conflict alone, the US spent $3.7 billion. That's an average of $891 million per day. At that burn rate, every additional week forces trade-offs with other priorities and broadcasts to the rest of the world that Washington is prepared to spend heavily to sustain this confrontation. Since the fighting began, benchmark oil prices are up over 20%. If flows through the Strait of Hormuz are seriously disrupted, you don't need imagination to see crude trading in the $100 to $120 range. That is not a one-week headline spike. It resets the cost base for transport, manufacturing, and any portfolio exposed to energy and global trade. But beyond the spreadsheets, there is the human price, and it does not stay over there. The same black rain you saw earlier is not a cinematic detail. It is that fine, oily soot that turns a clear sky into something you taste in your lungs. It shows up as respiratory wards filling up, aircraft grounded for inspection, and shipping insurers quietly edging premiums higher on every route that crosses this region. That is what a long war of attrition feels like in practice. Not constant crisis, but a higher floor of risk and cost built into everyday life and capital allocation, long after the headlines move on. If this framework for understanding the hidden logic of conflict was valuable, subscribe for more analysis that cuts through the noise, and share this video with someone who needs to see beyond the headlines and understand the real risks at play.